Welcome to Your Town. I'm Scott Dick, your host, and I'm with Josh Metz, he's FORA Economic Development Manager. Josh, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Scott.
You know, one of the big things with the Fort Ord reuse development is that it's running out. It's getting close to the end.
Time is running short on the legislatively defined time frame for FORA's existence. Currently, it's set for transition of some form June 30th, 2020. So that gives us about 3 years left to complete a pretty ambitious scope of work.
So what do we have left? What are we going to do in the next 3 years?
Yeah, that's the question a lot of people want to have answers to. You know, at the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, we work every day to advance the recovery from the closure of Fort Ord, which happened in '94, and the original time frame for FORA's to complete that work was through 2014. That was extended through a legislative act to 2020 because of the complexity of getting all the work done. You know, if you think about Fort Ord, which functioned as a military installation for just about 100 years, training infantry for most of our modern wars, and then making a transition to civilian use, you could imagine the types of infrastructure and urban amenities that we all take for granted were really have changed since the military first put that infrastructure down. So we've had to do a lot of remediation, environmental remediation, removal of unexploded ordnance has been a large body of work that's moving forward and quickly to completion. Indeed, there's a number of old buildings that remain out there. While there have been a fairly large number of those old buildings removed, there's still a number that remain. I think the stats were about 80% complete of removing or reusing all the buildings that were left there. It's about 4,200 buildings that were left.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been some criticism because that process of removing those older buildings hasn't moved faster.
True, and particularly if for many folks their greatest connection with Fort Ord is passing along Highway 1.
Sure. And
there's a number of World War II barracks that are the yellow wood frame buildings that you can see on the hill above Marina and closer to Seaside, just off Highway 1. And those buildings are contained within what's called a specific plan area within the city of Marina. It's called the Dunes at Monterey Bay Development. That's a large development that's planned for about 1,400 homes, a large commercial area, and will fill in where those barracks currently exist. That part of the complexity of taking them down is tied up with the patterns of economic change that we've dealt with through the recession.
Of course.
To now. Things have slowed down, but as the development, the building of new homes picks up speed, we're hoping to see those buildings quickly removed in the years ahead, and that indeed remains one of the priority areas that our staff and through board direction is focused on resolving.
I was always curious about how much it costs to take those buildings out, because some of those buildings are concrete barracks and
Right.
mess halls, and some have been reused, most of them are still there, derelict.
Yeah.
And then you have the wooden structures that were all over East Garrison.
Right.
So
each of the segments of the base, you know, are related to different periods of development that happened there. And so
on the base.
On the base.
For the military, correct.
For the military, indeed. So the wood barracks that are along Highway 1, those are largely from the pre-World War II and World War II era. Those were developed wood frame buildings, and the part of the complexity of taking them down and the related cost is that they were infused with lead-based paint and asbestos. And as our knowledge of the impacts of those types of chemicals on human health and safety have grown over the years, the need to treat those materials appropriately has required additional steps to be taken to eliminate those buildings. So you wouldn't just say drive a bulldozer through and light a match and hope they were gone. Now you got to pack it all down and take it to a specific storage areas and waste disposal sites. So, but we do have numbers for how those how much it costs to take those buildings down. In fact, the wooden buildings, those two-story frame buildings along Highway 1, they cost about $70,000 each to take down.
Wow.
And farther back on the base, up towards what's now CSU Monterey Bay and the backside of that campus, they're currently in the process of removing 30 Vietnam-era barrack buildings that are the steel and cement multi-story buildings. We refer to those as the hammerheads. If you look at them from an aerial view, they've got sort of a hammer shape.
Oh.
These buildings, they cost around $1 million each to take down. So the campus has received funding through the state to remove those last remaining 30 buildings on their campus, which will be complete in the next couple years. I mean, it's underway, coming to conclusion pretty rapidly. So
we're talking basically $30 million just to take care of those,
just to
down. Put them back down to dirt.
Indeed, and you know that's one of the major complexities of why it's taken so long to see new things emerging out of the ground at Fort Ord. Is before we could build new things, we had to take care of what was there, and so that's been a large segment of FORA's work up until now, and really it's been in the most recent 3 to 5 years. I've been at FORA almost 4 years now, and I've seen in my time there a significant increase in the amount of new structures that have been built, particularly right around our office at Imgen Parkway and 2nd Avenue, where you have the regional shopping center. There's what used to be called Chomp Wellness Center, which has now changed ownership. There's a new hotel that's come up there, the Spring Hill Marriott Suites, which should open in the next couple months. There's a new set of fast casual restaurants that have just opened, and off to the south, large multi-story building, which is the joint DOD-VA General Gorley Clinic, and that also should open this summer. So those are some of the big structures you would see, and then of course the Dunes housing development is rapidly growing. They're doing about let's say 100 plus units a year at the current pace, where they're selling units and building them as they're sold. But those are beautiful new homes, a number of different models, and they're currently selling well. So they're getting a great reception. And as those units grow and those neighborhoods grow, we'll see the subsequent takedown of more of that of those old barracks and replacement with housing and commercial areas.
Is there a relationship between that development and the ability to remove those old buildings, or to development and to improve the infrastructure out of the old Fort Ord? Because I know that
very intimately connected. So you know, Fort Ord is a 28,000 square foot footprint, the historic boundary of Fort Ord. So that's about 45 square miles, about the same size as the city and county of San Francisco.
Okay.
And over time, guided by the 1997 base reuse plan, there's been allocation of these lands from the federal government through FORA to a variety of local and state entities. And the process of doing that transfer and then subsequent development of a portion of that is all guided by this plan. But really, I think a credit to the plan makers. Indeed, the plan was awarded high honors by the American Planning Association at its time. It was a leading edge example of balanced kind of mixed use development planning. And so of those 28,000 acres, approximately 15,000 of those acres are currently in some form of conservation status. So all the dunes along Highway 1 that include about a 3-mile frontage on the National Marine Sanctuary, that's all part of the California State Park, the Fort Ord Dunes State Park. So currently open for public access. There's about 3 miles of trail there. There's about 5 miles of paved road and trail. And then there's a new campground that is planned to be developed there as well.
Oh, great.
And then the largest portion of the base, it's about 14,000 plus acres, is within what's now known as the Fort Ord National Monument that was designated in 2012 by President Obama. And that, together with the National Marine Sanctuary, the State Park, and the National Monument, make this incredibly rich landscape of native California landscape for conservation and recreation purposes. So around that, then the remaining land has been allocated for educational purposes in CSU Monterey Bay, which is a thriving kind of centerpiece of the reuse. It's growing to about 7,100 students currently, with about 1,000 full-time employees, well-paid, state employees and faculty there at the university. There's a large segment of land that was allocated to UC Santa Cruz for conservation purposes, and with the dream of developing a research and development park out on the kind of northeast boundary of the former Fort Ord along Reservation Road and Blanco Road in that area, known as UC MBEST, UC Monterey Bay Education, Science, and Technology Center. That's still an effort that we're actively involved in, hoping to realize some gains there. We see great opportunity with the marine research type entities and ag tech. We think ag tech's a real opportunity there, as well as things related to aviation and potential cybersecurity issues. Those are some of the bigger opportunity areas that we see for that development. And then, so that accounts for about about just over 20,000 of the acres. And when we account for the rest that's allocated for different public uses, we end up with about 3,700 acres of that 28,000 that has development potential, what you would think of as housing, commercial, office, and so on. And so all of that development on those 3,700 acres is what is paying for the conservation within the conservation areas and the mitigation of those impacts under the California Environmental Quality Act.
But in order to take care of all of that conservation, is that dependent on full build out? Indeed.
The way that it's currently structured, there's a thing called a community facility district, which is a fee that developers pay, and depends on the type of development that's being done. For individual new homes, currently the rate of for an individual home is about $24,000 per home.
Wow.
So those units and those fees then are put into a fund that's funding a regional habitat conservation plan, so for maintaining conservation habitat values in perpetuity, and then also paying for mitigations from those developments that really have to do with transportation infrastructure. So far, FORA is responsible for about 30 miles of new road that have been built on the base. General Jim Moore Boulevard is one well-known. Imjin Parkway is also a new road segment that has been built, as well as a number of other roads within the base, 2nd Avenue and so on.
What happens if FORA goes away? Who's going to pay for those conservation, all those?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and it's indeed what is before the board and the elected leadership that really is the guiding decision makers for FORA's activities. FORA board is comprised of 25 members with 13 voting members, from the cities of Seaside, Marina, Sand City, Pacific Grove, Carmel, Salinas, Delray Oaks, City of Monterey, and the County of Monterey. Those are all the voting members, and then with an associated suite of non-voting members on folks like the president of CSUMB, the president of Monterey Peninsula College, other educational institutions, representation by the Jimmy Panetta's office, Monning's office, Stone's office, and the U.S. Army, as well as the Transportation Agency of Monterey County and others. So it's a large board, and they are charged with, setting policy to achieve the reuse plan goals. And currently they have a decision before them once again as to whether FORA should indeed be transitioned and go away, or FORA potentially would be considered for an additional extension to complete the remaining work, which includes completion of major infrastructure projects planned like the East Side Parkway or East Side Bypass as it was originally known, improvements to South Boundary Road in Delray Oaks. Those are among the two top priorities, and there's some other farther down on the priority list that remain to be done. Also the complete removal of all those buildings, both the stuff on what's known as Surplus 2 off to the south boundary of CSUMB campus along Giggling Road, as well as the World War II era barracks along Highway 1 frontage. So that decision is the subject of ongoing study and evaluation, analysis, and debate at the board level. And we would expect within the next year that a decision will emerge as to what may happen. They've already provided direction to staff to pursue two tracks. One is the legislative effort that would be needed to get an official extension of the FORA Act,
Right.
and the other is planning for under the current time frame for a transition for the agency that would involve allocating those obligations, those remaining obligations, transportation, habitat conservation, economic development functions, and so on, to the various entities that currently comprise the board.
Josh, those are questions I've had for a while, and I appreciate you answering those for me. There's lots more to discuss.
Indeed.
And so I think I want to have you continue this discussion. And we'll talk about especially the infrastructure. Roads are really important given the traffic situation that we have on the peninsula.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to come back and talk with you more, Scott. It's important for us to get the word out to the community, and I think the more awareness we have of the functions of FORA and the remaining work to be done, I think that'll be valuable for everyone to know.
Thanks so much.
All right.